She was just a cleaner, until the child called her mom in front of him. She wasn't scared. She wasn't crying. She was perfectly calm, holding a mop handle almost as tall as she was. And she looked straight at the man who had just walked through the door. And then she said it. 2 words. "Hi, Mom." The room went completely silent. The man standing in the doorway, expensive suit, briefcase in hand, face frozen, didn't move. He just stared at the little girl, at the woman holding her hand, at the cleaning cart parked beside the window like it belonged there, because it did belong there. She was just a cleaner. At least, that's what everyone had been told. But in that moment, something cracked open in that room, something that had been sealed shut for 4 years. And the man in the doorway, the one who thought he knew everything about his own life, realized he knew almost nothing. Here's what I want you to think about as this story begins. Why would a 6-year-old girl call a stranger mom? Why would a woman who scrubs floors for a living be the most important person in that child's world? And why, when she heard those words, did she close her eyes like she'd been waiting for them her whole life? This is not the story you think it is. Stay with me. Let's go back 3 hours. It was a Tuesday, one of those gray, unremarkable mornings where the world just keeps moving and nobody notices anything. The kind of day where nothing is supposed to happen. Mara, that's her name, Mara Chun, arrived at the Callaway building at 7:14 a.m. She always arrived early. She had been cleaning this building for 2 years, and in that time she had learned 2 things. The elevators were slow, and Mr. Hargrove on the 4th floor left coffee rings on his glass desk every single morning without fail. She wore her gray uniform. She had her cart. She had her headphones in, not playing anything, just blocking the world out a little. She was invisible. That's not an insult. That's just what it felt like to be her on most days. People walked past her in corridors without making eye contact. They stepped around her mop like she was a piece of furniture. Once, a woman in a red blazer actually said, "Excuse me," to Mara's cart and not to Mara herself. Invisible. She had made peace with that. Mostly. But here's what nobody in that building knew about Mara Chun. Nobody knew what was in the small blue notebook she kept tucked inside her cleaning cart, under the extra trash bags. Nobody knew why she sometimes stood at the window on the 14th floor for exactly 3 minutes, staring at the street below, before going back to work. And nobody, absolutely nobody, knew about the photograph she kept folded in her left breast pocket, not even the people who thought they knew her best. That morning, she started on the ground floor like always, lobby first, revolving door glass, the marble floors, the reception desk that nobody sat at until 9. She worked quietly, efficiently, the way she always did. But at 7:42 a.m., something happened that had never happened before in 2 years. The elevator opened on the ground floor, and a little girl walked out, alone. She was maybe 5 or 6 years old, dark curly hair, a pink backpack that was clearly too big for her small shoulders, white sneakers with one lace undone, and she was looking around the lobby with wide, searching eyes like she was trying to find something she'd lost. Mara stopped mopping. The girl looked at her. Mara looked at the girl, and then the girl walked straight toward her, not hesitantly, not shyly, and stopped about 2 feet away and said very clearly, "Do you know where my daddy is?" Now, a normal person might have called security, or walked her back to the elevator, or found a receptionist. But Mara didn't do any of those things. She crouched down to the girl's level, which took a moment because her knees weren't what they used to be, and she looked at her very carefully. And something crossed Mara's face in that moment. Something that wasn't surprise. Something that looked, if you were watching closely, almost like recognition. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked. The girl answered. And I promise you, when you hear what she said, it will make everything that comes next make complete sense. But we're not there yet. First, you need to understand who Mara really was, because she was not just a cleaner. She never had been. Mara Chun was 51 years old. She had been born in a small apartment above a laundry shop in a part of the city that no longer exists. They tore it down when she was 12 and built a parking garage. She used to joke that her childhood had been replaced by a parking garage. It wasn't a very funny joke, but she made it anyway. Sometimes, when she was feeling brave enough to make jokes. Her mother had worked in a hospital kitchen. Her father had driven a delivery truck. They were not rich people. They were not poor people. They were the kind of people who worked very hard and expected nothing in return, and were largely correct to expect nothing in return. Mara had been a good student. Not exceptional. Good. She had liked reading. Still did. And she had a memory that held on to details the way good fabric holds on to color. She remembered things. Small things. The way a person held their cup. The hesitation before someone said something important. The difference between silence that is peaceful and silence that is hiding something. She had married at 28. His name was David. He was a soft-spoken man who taught primary school and made very good soup and laughed too loudly at his own jokes, which she had always found more endearing than annoying. They had been happy. Not the kind of happy you see in films. Not dramatic or loud or cinematic. Just the quiet, reliable kind of happy that comes from knowing someone's going to be there when you get home. The kind of happy that is so ordinary you don't even think to be grateful for it. And then, the way it always happens with the ordinary kind of happy, it ended, not all at once, gradually, and then suddenly. David got sick when Mara was 34. It started as something small, tiredness, then a cough, then a scan that showed something on his lung that had no business being there. 3 years. That's how long it took. 3 years of hospitals and hope and a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from loving someone who is leaving slowly while you stand there and hold their hand and pretend you are fine. He died on a Thursday. She still didn't like Thursdays. They had not had children. They had tried, early in the marriage, full of optimism, and it hadn't happened. And eventually they had made peace with it the way you make peace with anything. Imperfectly and with certain rooms in your heart that you learn to walk past without opening the door. After David, Mara had spent 2 years doing very little. She sold the apartment they had shared. She moved into a smaller one. She took jobs where she could be useful without being seen. And somehow, cleaning had fit that description perfectly. There is something honest about cleaning, she had always thought. You could see exactly what you had done. A dirty floor became a clean floor. A smudged window became a clear one. There were no ambiguities, no politics, no performance. She was good at it. She was thorough and quiet and reliable, and she had not missed a single day of work in 2 years, except once, when she caught a flu so severe that her supervisor had actually called her to tell her to stay home because she sounded, and these were his exact words, like a haunted radiator. She had laughed at that. She laughed more than people expected her to, given everything. That was one of the things about Mara that people got wrong when they looked at her. They saw the gray uniform and the cleaning cart and the invisible woman, and they assumed quiet sadness, assumed resignation. They didn't see the blue notebook. They didn't know about the classes she had been taking on Tuesday evenings for the past 18 months. Social work, child welfare, certification courses she paid for out of her own salary. They didn't know she volunteered at the city family shelter on Saturday mornings, 3 hours every week, regardless of weather. And they absolutely did not know about the folder she kept at home, a thick, carefully organized folder, full of documents related to a case that the courts had closed 4 years ago, a case involving a child, a case she had never been able to let go of. Here is what I need you to understand about Mara Chun before this story goes any further. She was not a hero. She was not trying to be one. She was just a woman who had lost enough things in her life to know, deeply, in the bone-level way that only real loss teaches, that some things cannot be given back once they're gone. Children are one of those things. Childhood is one of those things. She believed this the way some people believe in God. Not loudly, not with argument, just quietly, as a truth that organized everything else. So when that little girl walked out of the elevator that Tuesday morning, When she looked up at Mara with those wide, searching eyes, when she said her name, Mara didn't call security. Because the name the girl said was not a stranger's name. It was a name Mara had read, again and again, in a folder that lived in a drawer beside her bed. It was a name she had whispered to herself sometimes, in the dark, wondering. The girl's name was Lily, and Mara had been looking for her for 4 years. Let me take you back. Not far, just 4 years. Mara had not always been a cleaner. 4 years ago, she had been a caseworker. Junior level, overworked, underpaid, but a caseworker. She had worked for the city's child welfare department for 6 years. And in those 6 years, she had seen things that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. She had seen children who were loved and children who were not. She had seen parents who were trying and parents who had given up entirely. She had seen the bureaucracy of compassion, all the forms and hearings and assessments that stand between a child in danger and a child who is safe. And she had understood early on that the system was not designed to be fast. It was designed to be careful. And sometimes careful and fast are not the same thing. Lily's case had come to her in the spring. A neighbor had called it in. A woman named Mrs. Patterson. Elderly, sharp-eyed. The kind of neighbor who notices everything and says nothing until she can't stand it anymore. She had called the welfare line and said very plainly, "There's a little girl in the apartment next door, and I haven't heard her laugh in 3 weeks." That was the whole report. I haven't heard her laugh in 3 weeks. Mara had gone to that apartment on a Wednesday afternoon. She remembered the peeling paint on the hallway wall. She remembered the smell. Not terrible, not dangerous, just a particular smell of a home that had stopped being cared for. She remembered the sound of a television playing in another room. The door had been answered by a man. Harlan Voss, 38, the girl's father, according to the file. He was not what you call threatening. He was thin and tired-looking, and he had the specific hollow politeness of someone who knew they were being assessed and was trying imperfectly to pass. He offered Mara coffee. She declined. He sat across from her at a kitchen table that had papers piled at one end and said everything she needed him to say. The mother had left 8 months ago. He was managing. Things had been difficult. He was between jobs. The girl was fine. The girl is fine. She had heard those words before. She asked to see Lily. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, and then called her name. Lily had come out of a back room slowly. She was 2 years old, small for her age. She was wearing a shirt that was slightly too large, and she had the careful, watchful stillness of a child who has learned to be quiet. She had looked at Mara with enormous dark eyes, and Mara had smiled at her, and Lily very slowly, like something thawing, had almost smiled back. Almost. That almost had stayed with Mara. She had filed her report. She had flagged the case as moderate concern. She had scheduled a follow-up visit for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks later, the apartment was empty. Harlan Voss and his daughter were gone. Mara had reported it immediately. She had pushed and followed up and pushed again. But Harlan Voss had not broken any laws. Not officially. Not yet. He had moved. People were allowed to move. There were no formal charges, no court orders, nothing that gave the system a hook to act on. The case was marked inactive. And then, 2 months later, Mara had made the mistake. She had kept looking on her own. She had used work databases to run searches she wasn't authorized to run. She had cross-referenced school enrollment records. She had contacted shelters in 3 counties asking if they'd seen a man and a toddler matching the description. It was against protocol. She knew it. She did it anyway. When her supervisor found out, there was no shouting. There was just a meeting and a form, and the word terminated spoken in the exhausted voice of someone who genuinely wished they didn't have to say it. She lost her job. She lost her certification. She lost the one thing that had given her days structure and purpose since David died. And Lily, little Lily with the almost smile, disappeared into whatever life her father was building in some unnamed elsewhere. If this story is already hitting something in you, stick with me. The hardest part hasn't come yet. Mara had not stopped looking. She just looked differently now. She took the cleaning job. It gave her access to buildings, to people, to conversations she would never have had otherwise. She took the volunteer work. She took the night courses. She built a folder. Every few months, she would quietly, carefully check school registrations in the metro area, vaccination records when she could find them, anything that might tell her Lily was alive and okay. She had not found anything until 14 days ago. Someone at the shelter, a social worker named Priya, who knew Mara's history and trusted her completely, had mentioned offhand that she'd processed a re-enrollment request for a girl, 6 years old, being brought into a new school district. The father's name on the form was listed as H. Voss. The girl's name was Lily. They were in this city. Mara had stood very still when Priya told her that, and then she had gone home and opened the folder and sat at her kitchen table until 3 in the morning, thinking about what to do next. She had not expected to find her standing in a lobby with a pink backpack and one undone shoelace, asking where her daddy was. Some things you cannot plan for. Do you know where my daddy is? Those were the words. Mara crouched down and looked at Lily, really looked at her, and the first thing she felt was relief, a relief so powerful it almost knocked her sideways, because Lily looked okay. She was small, still small for her age, but her eyes were bright and curious, and there was something in her face that hadn't been there for years ago. That almost smile, it had become a real one. She was wearing clean clothes. Her hair was brushed. The backpack, too big, yes, but clearly new, had a little keychain on it shaped like a dinosaur. She looked, in other words, like a child who was loved. And Mara felt two things at once, the relief of that and the deep, complicated ache of it. "What's your name?" she asked, gently, the way she'd learned to speak to children who weren't sure yet if they should trust you. "Lily," the girl said. "Lily Voss. I'm 6. She held up 6 fingers, in case there was any doubt. "That's a beautiful name," Mara said. "And your daddy, is he supposed to be meeting you here?" Lily nodded very seriously. "He said he'd be in the lobby at 8. He said, don't move. But it's past 8, and he's not here, and I don't know where the bathroom is." The last part was clearly the more urgent concern. Mara took her to the bathroom. She waited outside the door. She stood very still and breathed very carefully and told herself, "You are a cleaner. You are just a cleaner. Do not do anything stupid." When Lily came back out, she looked at Mara with a directness that was startling. "You smell like lemons," she said. "It's the floor cleaner," Mara said. "I like lemons," Lily said. And she reached out and took Mara's hand. Just like that. No hesitation. No asking. Just a small hand sliding into Mara's like it belonged there. Mara's throat tightened. She walked Lily back to the lobby, and they sat together on the bench near the revolving door. Mara had called reception. The desk was still unmanned at this hour, and left a message for security to check if a Mr. Voss was in the building. And while they waited, Lily talked. Children talk when they feel safe. It is one of the most reliable signs that something is okay. And Lily talked about her new school, about her best friend whose name was Sophie, about how her daddy made the best scrambled eggs in the world, but always burned the toast. She went back to her cart. She put her headphones in, not playing anything, just blocking the world out a little. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. She started cleaning Mr. Hargrove's glass desk, the coffee ring, same as always, and she was halfway through when her phone buzzed. A message from Priya. No words, just a screenshot, a news article, 3 paragraphs, from a city in another state. The headline read, "Man sought for questioning in child custody fraud investigation." The photograph showed a man she recognized. It was not Harlan Voss, but it was someone who knew him. And suddenly, sickeningly, Mara understood why Lily was in this building. And it had nothing to do with a school enrollment or fresh start. Mara put her phone in her pocket. She looked at the elevator. And she made a decision that would change everything, for Lily, for Harlan Voss, and for herself. The man in the photograph was named Raymond Cole. Mara had first found his name 6 weeks ago, buried in a court document that had been filed, and then quietly sealed in the original Voss custody case. Raymond Cole had been listed as a character witness for Harlan Voss in a hearing that never actually took place, because Lily's mother had dropped her custody claim before it got that far. At the time, Mara had thought, coincidence, a friend, irrelevant. But Priya, who was more methodical than Mara had ever given her credit for, had kept pulling the thread, and what she found was this. Raymond Cole was not a friend. Raymond Cole was a broker, not the financial kind. The other kind, the kind who specialized in moving children, legally, semi-legally, and occasionally not at all, across state lines, between families, through the cracks in a system that was overwhelmed and underfunded and not always watching. He had been investigated 3 times, never charged. The kind of man who knew exactly how close he could get to a line without crossing it, and his name, Raymond Cole, appeared in the contact records of 4 families who had, in the past 6 years, been involved in disputed custody situations. One of those families was the Voss family. Mara stared at her phone screen. She thought about Lily in the lobby, the pink backpack, the dinosaur keychain. Daddy makes scrambled eggs. She thought about Harlan Voss's face when Lily called Mara Mom. The careful expression, the slow question, have we met? And now she thought about this. Why was Harlan Voss in this building? She had assumed he worked here, or had a meeting here. People came and went through this building all day, but the article Priya had sent, she read it again, more carefully now, mentioned that Raymond Cole had last been seen in this city this week, and that investigators believed he was meeting with individuals connected to an ongoing case. Raymond Cole was here, possibly in this building, and Harlan Voss, with his daughter, with his dinosaur keychain, with his scrambled eggs, was here too. Mara pressed herself against the wall of the 14th floor corridor. She needed to think. Option 1. She was wrong. This was coincidence. Harlan had a legitimate reason to be here. He had changed. People changed. She had seen Lily's face. She had held Lily's hand. You could not fake that ease, that happiness, that small hand trust. Option 2. She was right. And if she was right, then Lily, bright-eyed, dinosaur keychain, wants to be a vet Lily, was being used in something she had no idea about. And Mara was standing 14 floors above her. She took a breath. She made a choice. She took out her phone and called Priya. Where is Cole right now? She said, before Priya could even say hello. Good morning to you too, Priya said. And then, we don't know exactly. Why? Because I think he's in my building, Mara said. And I think Harlan Voss is here too, with the girl. A pause. Mara, Priya's voice dropped. What did you do? Nothing yet, Mara said. I need 20 minutes. You need to call someone official. I know. 20 minutes, Priya. She hung up. She looked at the elevator. She thought about a caseworker who had lost her job for caring too much. She thought about a woman who had spent 4 years cleaning floors in a city where a child might or might not be safe. She thought about Lily's hand in hers. Some things cannot be given back once they're gone. She pressed the elevator button. The elevator took forever. When it finally arrived on the 14th floor, Mara stepped in and pressed a button for 6. That was where Harlan Voss had gone. She had seen him press it in those few seconds before the lobby doors closed. The 6th floor was leased by a consulting firm. She cleaned it every Wednesday. Today was Tuesday. She shouldn't be there. She went anyway. She was carrying something, a small, slightly lopsided cupcake on a paper plate, with blue frosting and a gummy elephant pressed into the top. I made it, Lily said. Daddy helped with the oven part, but I did the frosting. The frosting looks beautiful, Mara said. I know, said Lily. Mara stood up. She took the cupcake. Lily looked at her with those wide, serious eyes. Are you still the cleaner? She asked. For now, Mara said, but I'm also studying to be something else. What? Someone who helps families. Officially. Lily thought about this. Like what you did for us? Like what I did for you, but with better paperwork. Lily nodded, satisfied. Then she held up her arms. Mara crouched down, and Lily hugged her. Completely, wholeheartedly, the way only children hug, like they mean every single cell of it. Mara closed her eyes. She thought, this is a thing you cannot give back once it's gone. This exact thing. She held on for a moment. Then she let go, gently, the right way, and stood up. Thank you for the cupcake, she said. You're welcome, said Lily. It has a lemon in it, because you smell like lemons. Mara laughed, really laughed, the kind that fills a room. That, she said, is the best reason anyone has ever given me for anything. If this story stayed with you, if Mara reminded you of someone or Lily's voice stayed in your head a little, that's not an accident. Real stories do that. They find the place in you that already knew them. Subscribe if you want more. Share if someone else needs to hear it. And leave a comment telling us, who was the person in your life who showed up quietly when it really mattered? We read every single one.